Hi everybody, thanks for coming to this talk straight after lunch. Hopefully I don't put you all to sleep, but today we're going to be talking around, is Teams ready to be your contact center? I'll tell you the answer now in case you want to leave, it depends. But please wait around and we'll talk through it. So, obligatory slide of thanking our sponsors today. So without this, none of this would be possible. Thanks for the guys for putting on the event as well. So you've probably already gone to see them, but if not, please feel free, have a walk around. Without those, this would not be possible. Our agenda today, we're going to be talking around understanding voice applications and maximizing their effectiveness, exploring the current capabilities that we have within Teams, and we'll discuss a little bit around the future as well. Evaluating if these Contact Center Lite features that we're going to be talking about align with your organizational needs, determining if a third-party solution is necessary, and then we shall explore some real-world customer scenarios that I've gone through as well. And we'll end it with a Q&A. But I always like them to be a little bit more interactive. If you've got a question at the time, pop your hand up and we'll hopefully be able to answer it for you. Little on the introduction on me, I'm a principal architect at LoopUp. We are enabling global organizations to migrate to Microsoft Teams Phone. So we're an Operator Connect. I'm sure you probably heard us boasting about being #1 on coverage for Operator Connect somewhere across LinkedIn. But yeah, we're an Operator Connect provider and direct routing as a service provider. So that's a little bit about me. If you want to reach out and have a chat to me, check me out on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to get hold of me. So we'll jump straight in and we'll talk around voice applications and maximizing their effectiveness. So when we're talking about voice applications, we're talking around two distinct groups that make up those voice applications. We've got auto attendants and we've got call queues. Your auto attendants, these are your main lines into your business. It's your IVRs, press 1 for sales, press 2 for support, that sort of thing. And then on the left-hand side, we've got your call queues. These are, once the calls are in your business, how are you distributing them around your organization? How are you getting them to your agents? I've got a little screenshot on here. This is from the Teams Admin Center for a proof of concept that I ran for a customer. So what you can see is multiple auto attendants and multiple call queues are what's going to make up, ultimately, your solution. Before we jump into talking around those two things, we have to mention resource accounts. I'll keep it brief, but resource accounts are effectively your entry points into your call flows. So these are non-enabled user accounts. They hold a number, and it's how your system resources can basically point towards each other and speak to each other on the back end. There is a license requirement. Every single resource account requires the Microsoft Teams Phone resource account license. There is a zero-cost license for this. Each tenant, by default, gets 25 out the box, and then you get 10% based on your phone system licenses. So if you've got phone system add-ons, if you've got E5, they all count towards your extra 10%. Super simply, if you've got 100 E5s in your tenant, you're going to get your base 25, and then you're going to get an extra 10, so you're going to get 35 overall resource account licenses for free to assign to your resource accounts. One quick thing to mention as well is multiple resource accounts can be added as entry points to the voice apps. So for example, like your main auto attendant, we'll come on to that, but you can have multiple numbers go into the exact same flow. And then importantly as well with resource accounts, if you're looking at doing any kind of caller ID or call on behalf of, this is the phone number that you're going to assign to that queue to allow your users to be able to dial out with. Okay, so we'll jump into auto attendants. Like I mentioned before, these are your main lines into your business. They are, 9 times out of 10, they're IVRs. So press 1 for sales, press 2 for this. The key important thing with auto attendants, though, is you can have time of day routing. So you're able to say what's in hours, what's out of hours, and route calls differently depending on that. So when you go through and create your auto attendants, couple of things for you to think of, or your routing decisions, and that's where do you want that call to ultimately route to. So we run a route based on things like time of day, so you can have that in and out of hours like I mentioned. You can also route based on holidays, so 4th of July is the same time every single year. You can basically set and forget that, put your holidays in there, and have a completely different routing set based on that time of year. Like I mentioned before, the greetings and the menu options, these are the main kind of decisions that your auto attendants are going to make, and that's going to be, press a key to speak to sales or support, something like that. On every single auto attendant as well, we have the notion of operators, so you can assign an operator to a queue. That could be a named person, or it can be a whole other queue. Say you have like a bank of receptionists attached to that queue. And then lastly, for an auto attendant, we have the directory search. So you can have, a search by name. It's called dial by name. You can search via voice, or you can do DTMF, and you can actually do extension as well. So let's talk a little bit around that time of day routing. So this is just a screenshot out of the Teams admin center, but what you can see, you can be very granular around how you want your calls to flow in and out of hours. You can have, a 24-hour always open call queue if you'd like, or same hours every single weekday or weekend. But importantly as well, what you can do is you can split that up throughout the day as well. So you can have multiple days and actually consider yourself out of hours throughout the day. So you can have multiple hour slots. Let's say everybody goes on lunch at 12, so you want to play a different message, something like that. Next, we have that holiday routing that I mentioned before. This is, you can create a holiday set and have multiple dates in here. So you can kind of say, when this time of year rolls around, or you can actually do it for the next 10 years, for example. And you can have a particular holiday greeting that would be attached to that auto attendant and give you some different routing depending on if that holiday is happening. Now, the main part of those of those auto attendants are your IVRs. So when you get through to configuring these, you're going to be asked a couple of questions. You can upload a greeting. That can be text, or that can be an audio file if you want to upload that. You can have up to 12 menu options, and you can turn each of those into a voice command as well. So there's a voice input that you can turn on, and that will allow you, instead of using DTMF and pressing 1, you could just press sales, go through to the sales department. Now the destinations for these, they can be each of your options. You can have them as an operator, like I mentioned before. That could be a designated person or another queue. You can just place it to any person in the organization. To be perfectly honest, I wouldn't recommend that. That's not something that we usually say, especially if you've, a larger organization, people leave. If you're not replacing those in the queues, that'll just go dead and just disconnect that particular user. Best practice is using another voice app. So, put in another auto attendant if you wanted to do nested auto attendants, or you can actually do a call queue as well. And when you're configuring these queues, 99% of the time they are call queues attached to your auto attendants. You've got a sales queue, you've got a support queue that are hanging off the back of that. Other options, you've got M365 voicemail groups. So you can leave a message and attach people to those groups so they can come back and listen to those voice messages. You can actually direct calls to an external phone number as well. So if you had like an out of hours answering service, or you were in a building that wasn't managed by you and you wanted to put the management of the building into your call flow, you can do that. And then lastly, this is a newer one, but you can add an announcement. So that can, question? I don't see any reason why not. Yeah, just a standard PSTN number. So you can put just any PSTN number and it'll fire that out over the PSTN. Yeah, and then the announcements at the end, that can be a text-to-speech. So you can, just play text, or you can upload your own file. We saw this being used quite a lot during the pandemic. People, if you want to learn our office schedule or opening hours, you can play that on a option on an auto attendant rather than having to go through and speak to a particular person. Next, we have that directory search that I mentioned before. So this is that dial by name. You can also scope this as well, so you can include and exclude people. On your auto attendant dial by name, you're probably not going to want your CEO. So that's definitely someone that you can exclude from that list. Make sure that they're not reachable. Or a good thing, something that we do at LoopUp, it's only our salespeople. So if you were to come through and try and get hold of someone, you're only going to be getting hold of them, no one else in the business. Sorry, Brian. As well as that dial by name, you can also do dial by extension. So if you've got that configured in Teams as well, you can dial out to particular users via that. Yeah, you can still assign an extension to the users. So if you do want to use the dial by extension functionality, that does still work. So just to recap on the flow of an auto attendant, we're usually asked a couple of questions as we go through this flow. So first question, are we in a holiday? Yes or no, we would route somewhere else. Depending on that, are we in working hours or are we out of working hours? We will route a different way depending on what happens. And then we get an action. We can redirect that call as we decide, depending on the questions that we've had before. We could play menu prompts, message audio, that sort of thing. And then we'll wait for a response. So that can be DTMF or that can be voice. And then, if configured, we can have a dial by name at the end of it. Next, we have call queues. So call queues are the other part of your voice applications. These are when the calls are in your business, how are you passing around to your agents? How are you getting people to actually answer those calls? So again, first thing to remember is how do you want these users to have those calls delivered? There are a couple of distribution decisions. These are often around members. So who do you want to be in your queues? Who are your agents that are sat in these queues? Who should be receiving those calls? You can have the distribution method as well. So do we just want to pass the call to everybody in the queue? The first person to pick it up will get that call. Or we can be a little bit clever around that. In a call queue as well, we have exception handling. So you can define certain scenarios for overflow or timeout, or even now, no agents available. So Teams is getting a little bit more clever to be able to decide there's no one in this queue, let's do something else. Next on the call distribution, we'll talk around who should actually be receiving those calls. So like I mentioned, this will be your membership. So who's going to be in your queues. Teams is in a unique position where you're able to use Teams channels. So you're able to configure, if agents are just in a channel, then you can pass calls to, they can be your agent list, to be able to distribute calls to. Alternatively, you have users and groups. This is an either or. So you either choose Teams channels or you choose users and groups. You can't have both on a queue, okay? Users and groups, you can select 20 individual people to be in that queue, and you can move them up and down and change them depending on your routing method. If you were to select groups, you can do security groups, Office 365 groups, have them as your membership for your queue. Just bear in mind, if you've got individuals in there and groups, it's going to take your individuals first before it moves on to the groups. Next is conference mode. This is enabled by default. Recommend just leaving this on, but it's going to allow your calls to connect quicker, and will also enable call and transfer capabilities with your call queues as well. So next, once we've decided who's going to be getting those calls, we need to decide how we're going to route those calls to those people. So these are your routing methods that you have in Teams at the moment. We have round robin. Effectively what this does is tries to balance it throughout the day. Microsoft have an algorithm that we'll try and figure that out for you. But effectively, if you've got 3 people in your queue, person 1 and 2 have answered 3 calls, person 3 has answered 1, then person 3 is going to get that next call that hits the queue. Okay, so it tries to keep it very fair. Next is the longest idle. So this is using presence in Teams. So it's using that available, functionality or the presence that you can see on Teams users. Effectively, whoever has been available the longest, they're getting that next call. So as soon as it hits the queue, it's going to go to the available person. Next, we have attendant routing. So this will effectively ring all the users at once. First person to answer, that toast gets the call. Okay? And then lastly, at the end, we have the serial routing. So this will go 1, 2, 3, and it will go down the list. If you choose a Teams channel or a group, it will go alphabetical in that list. So probably not recommended for serial routing, unless by happen chance your alphabetical list is the actual list that you want to go through. As well on here, we have presence-based routing. This can be turned on for all of your queues, okay? So what this will do is we'll use the presence in Teams, and it will either present that user a call or not, depending on their availability. So in most use cases, if you're in a call, you can't take another call, okay? So you can have this presence-based routing on instead of the users getting notifications about calls coming in. They can ignore that and they won't get those calls. Now, one thing on the presence-based routing though, if you wanted to, for example, have a VIP queue, so if someone was to hit this queue, no matter what, I want people to be answering these calls, don't care if you're in a call or not, turn that presence-based routing off. Doesn't matter if anybody's in a call, if they're still in that queue, they're going to be getting the notification to take that call. A couple of other things on call queues, opting in and out. So you as the person that's designed these queues, you can force people to be in those queues, or you can give them the option to let them step in and out at their own leisure. Okay? We'll come on to it on a little bit, but right now, natively in queues, you can't force someone to be in that queue. So if they opt out, they're going to have to toggle that switch to opt back in. And then lastly, we have the alert timer. So default is 20 seconds. I wouldn't recommend bringing it any lower than that just because of cloud setup times. But effectively, this is how long that toast notification is going to pop up before moving on to the next person. Lastly, on call queues, we'll have the exception handling. So exception handling, we have call overflow. So this is if your queue is full. So you get to determine what you see as full. Maximum amount of calls that can be in a queue is 200 right now. Let's say we set that for 5, for example. The 6th person that calls in and hits that queue, they're going to get redirected to what we decide. Those redirection options are an organization, a person in the organization, another voice app, so another call queue or another auto attendant, an external PSTN number again, a personal voicemail box, or a group voicemail box. Okay? And you'll see a similar story throughout all of these, with the call timeout. This is how long you want people to be waiting in your queue. So no matter what, once they've hit that queue, I want someone to pick up the phone within 2 minutes, or we're going to transfer somewhere else. Okay? So if you were to set that to 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 1 second hits, it's going to redirect to, again, one of the choices down below. And then lastly, this was what I mentioned before, you have no users available. So with this option, again, Teams has got a little bit smarter. It's able to see, no one's going to be able to take this call. So what would happen previously is you would sit in that queue, hearing the on-hold music until the timeout hit. Not great, but what you can do now natively is it'll realize that there's no one available, and then you can redirect to one of your options down below. So to recap on call queues, have a welcome message at the beginning as well. So you can play, welcome to the sales queue. That could be text or audio if you require. And And then we'll move on to actually ringing those agents. So you can have your different options, channel calling or users or groups, depending on what you choose. And then we have the exceptions next to it. So if we waited too long, so has that timeout hit? Is there too many calls in the queue? So we redirect again. And then lastly, is there anybody actually available to take that call? So next, let's look at the current capabilities that we have within Teams. So what I'll do is I'm going to cherry pick some of the features or some of the capabilities that have come up to me in customer calls, or customers have decided to go, you know what, I didn't even know this was available in Teams. One of those being the dial by name. Surprisingly, how feature-rich this is natively in Teams. Voice inputs has to be enabled on the auto attendant for this to work, but you can reach, end users directly through the auto attendant via the dial by name functionality. I would say though, best practice for this is to try and separate that out into its own separate auto attendant, just for the sole reason of, because voice inputs has to be on. If you don't want that on your main queue, then you can separate that out, and if someone accidentally says something that sounds like sales instead of the dial by name or the person, you're going to the right place. There is a limit, 80,000 person limit. I haven't seen anybody hit it yet, but I'm sure there's some organizations out there that can do. And that's, across all of AD around searching for those particular users. I mentioned before around scoping. It's definitely a good thing to do as well. We see on the right-hand side, you can search for first name, last name, or partial names. If it brings back more than 5 names, then it will fail. It won't bring that back for you. So making sure that you scope that correctly, and you can include or exclude people from this particular scoping. So use both of those, whitelist and blacklist, to kind of get that exactly as you need. I mentioned that holiday routing before, but this is, a kind of set and forget functionality. It's not something that just before you go off for Christmas, someone needs to go in and make all the changes to their auto attendants. You can kind of pre-do this, throughout the year. One scenario we have is in the UK, universities have something called a clearing period. So this is where they get super busy. So everybody rings in and, their phone lines get completely jammed. One particular university that I helped out, we did this holiday routing just for their clearing period. So it was a completely different set of routing. So they kind of could cherry pick exactly what they needed throughout the time of year. That exception handling, like I mentioned before, super simple. This is how you're going to get your overflows to work. So, first line into second line support, this is how that's going to work. They're going to go through your call overflows. One thing I didn't mention is the disconnect functionality. So that was always something I would say, don't disconnect. Why just drop a call? But some organizations do want to do that. Very recently, thankfully, Microsoft put this capability inside of here where you're able to at least play a message. So if you want to, you can just disconnect the call. But what we can do is we can now play an audio file or a greeting message. Or a text message. Another big one is call queue position. This is something that a lot of people have said is missing from native Teams call queues right now. You still can't do it. You still can't do UR position X in the queue. One workaround that I've spoke with a few customers around doing though is you can change the default music on hold that's on that queue. So instead of just playing that Teams music, which I hear in my dreams sometimes, I've heard it that much, so please change that. What you can do is you can upload your own audio file. So thanks for dealing with us, we're super busy, just so it's not just default people waiting. Another functionality is channel calling. So I mentioned it briefly before, but this is the ability to make anybody that's in a particular Teams channel part of your queues. One thing I didn't mention is this actually opens up a couple different functionalities as well in Teams. So you're also given a Teams calls tab directly in that channel as well. And you can see from the screenshot on the right, you see some things that you don't usually see on a call queue. So for example, we can see agents that are opted into that queue. So you can see, other agents, and you can see if they're available or even if they're opted into the queue at all. And it also offers you the ability as an agent to quickly step in and out of that queue. Another thing on channel calling as well is a big thing that some customers say is missing from Teams is being able to manage the membership of your Teams. Don't worry, we'll come on to talking around the Queues app, but this was built before the Queues app got announced. There are still native ways to handle that membership. Right now, though, it's through Teams channels. So if you, as a manager, wanted to manage who was in and out of that queue, you can add and remove them from a Teams channel, and that will effectively put them in and take them out of that queue. This is a way you can do that, manage that membership, and not have to have particular managers have access to the Teams Admin Center. So it's completely separate. Another thing I've been asked, surprisingly, is around call answering. So if you were going to look at Teams for your contact center scenarios, especially if you're in multiple queues, how you're going to see what calls for what queue, that's all baked directly into the native Teams notifications. So we can see in the top right, we've got a call that's meant for a particular call queue. So you can see exactly, that's using the resource account name. So you can see exactly where that call is expected for. We have a customer that answers different lines with different openings based on who's ringing in. So they're able to use that and determine who's ringing in and give them the correct opening. Lastly in here as well, we have the call on behalf as. So what you can do is natively in Teams, you can dial out as your personal DDI or DID. But what you can do is if you've got call queues configured, you can also ring out as those as well. So if you wanted to ring out as a Canada mainline today, then you can do that. And that's simply on the dial pad. You can have call. If you do the drop down on the right arrow and you're in these queues, you can also call on behalf of those queues as well. And another functionality for contact centers is the ability for screen pops. So screen pops are available in native Teams. I've had it working with a customer for Salesforce. Effectively, it's handled by a calling policy that's inside of Teams. What it will do, it will pop records based on an inbound PSTN number. Okay, that's all it will do right now. We don't have any other functionality for that particular screen pop, but if that's all you're after, then there are native functionality built in. Right now, we have some voice applications policies. So these are the ability where you're able to control particular auto attendance and call queues if you are an authorized user. So for example, we've got auto attendance. We can change the business hours greetings, the after hour greetings, and the holiday greetings for auto attendance. And then for call queues, we can change welcome greetings, what the music on hold is, voicemail greetings, shared voicemail greetings, based on the exception handling that we spoke about previously as well. So right now there's a maximum of 15 authorized users per queue. Yeah, this is the native functionality that's in Teams right now. Now you've probably heard of the Queues app or heard that mentioned. We'll come on to that in a little bit, but this is some additional functionality coming to voice applications policies. It's been massively expanded due to this, announcement of the Queues app. We can see functionality inside of here, such as changing the membership of a call queue, changing, the agent routing methodologies of that call queue, actually real-time metrics and reporting. You can see all that in there. This is all from the live Microsoft Learn page. My guess is anything that's Teams Premium required, that's going to be part of your Teams Queues app. Spoiler that the Queues app requires Teams Premium, but we'll come on to that right now. So the Queues app. Microsoft announced this in March 2024 at Enterprise Connect, to a lot of shocks around around the contact center space. It's currently due to go GA in June, and it's even got a feature ID on the roadmap now that you can see. It's going to be an app that's in the sidebar on Teams, so you're going to be able to see that directly in your Teams client. There are some third parties that do this as well, where you can have a baked-in app on the sidebar, but this will be a Teams native one. A lot of people saying this is expected to kind of bridge the gap. So it's going to bring you some of those contact center functionalities where, maybe Teams just isn't quite there to be able to deliver. It is a Teams Premium feature, so any agents or managers that are going to be required to be in these queues and use this Queues app are going to need that Premium feature add-on, and they will still need access to the Teams phone. So to be in those queues and see that, they're still going to need that. We've had a mention of Windows desktop release, but no mention of web or Mac releases yet. Yeah, voice only. So the Queues app, powerful new capabilities coming into this around queue management and being able to manage these queues. You can see from the screenshot, we're able to manage multiple queues at once. So you can have those dotted across the top, and also do things like opting yourself into those queues very, very simply. We also have the ability to, at a glance, see who is and who isn't in that queue. So this again is the Queues app, not what we currently have right now natively, but this is inside of this Queues app. What you're going to be able to do is opt in your agents. So you're going to be able to say, no, you are now in that queue, and force them to join that queue. In the Queues app as well, around queues management, we can see incoming and outgoing calls from the queue. So on the left-hand side, we can see, what's happened for the particular queue, and probably one of the biggest features, requests, or something that I've been asked about far too many times, is the ability for Whisper, Barge, and Monitor. So Whisper being where an agent can listen in, and only the other agent can hear your call, and the end customer can't. Sorry, hear your voice and the end customer can't. We have the Barge functionality, where you can just jump in to that call straight away, and both sides will be able to hear you. And then we have Monitor. So that will be where you can hear both sides of the call, but you yourself can't speak in that call. No mentions anything right now of moving through those levels. So if you join on a Monitor, you're going to be able to move up to Barge, or not been given any information as that now. But important thing to mention, this particular feature is planned after launch. So that was one thing that they mentioned in their release in June 2024, that's not necessarily going to have the Whisper, Barge, and Monitor features straight away. Okay? And lastly, on the Queues app management, we have the ability to manage those particular flows. So this was that table that you saw before, and you're able to manage particular things like the conferencing mode on the queue, who is actually in that queue, and this is all done directly from the Queues app in your client. So you're not having to log into the Teams Admin Center to make those changes. You can do it directly in the Teams app itself. One thing to mention actually on that previous slide is anybody that's going to need to do this will need the Queues app and will need the premium feature. But if you were to still have your membership of queues via Teams channels, via the channel calling like I mentioned before, or via security groups, and that's how you're managing your membership, that isn't going to change. So you're still going to be able to do that without requiring that premium feature. Next, another big one is on reporting. So reporting right now for the Qs app, we've been told real time. I don't know what real time is. The last time I heard real time from Microsoft, it was in 30 minutes. That's not too real time. But I have heard grumblings of around 5 seconds. So if it is, that's perfect for a wallboard. You know, that's what you're gonna, one of the biggest things I think this reporting is gonna be used for is that, you know, being able to chuck that up in a contact center and see exactly what calls are coming in and out of the organization. You can view this from a holistic point of view, so you can look at all your auto attendants or all your call queues. Or what you can do as well is look at actual agent performance. So you can go down and get some metrics on an agent value. Again, planned after launch. This is not something that's going to be coming necessarily June 2024. Yeah, you got a question? That's a great question, and we don't know yet. My assumption, though, is if they're in the queue, you're going to be able to, you know, get the reporting on them, because you can still be in the queue, but not in the Qs app. Okay, so you can still be an agent in that queue, and you know, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm with Microsoft. I can confirm that one. So
Perfect.
you can be a supervisor and manage users that are not licensed for the Qs app.
Yeah.
As long as you're licensed, and you can have a mix of users in supporting a queue.
Yeah.
Some licensed that'll have the full capabilities, and some unlicensed. It's a great use case for peak times where you bring in people to help with taking calls that don't need to be licensed.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you. Maybe you can answer this one. One thing that I would love to see is scheduled reporting. So, you know, right now we can see these reports, but, you know, there's some great third parties out there now that bundle those reports in. Point at your market code. That bundle those reports in, and they can send them out on schedules. We've not been given any information about what can happen with those reports right now.
That one I haven't seen. One good thing I can confirm when you're talking about the wallboard earlier, there will be an API to get real-time information out of it.
Okay.
So you can build like
Your own. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Between 5 seconds and 30 minutes, somewhere in there.
Closer to 5 seconds. Like 2 minutes is what I heard on target is initially, and then they're hoping to bring that down.
Perfect. Thank you.
How long is the historical information kept?
Again, we're not quite sure.
28 days.
Oh, there we go. 28 days. Perfect. Yeah, I think it would align to things like CQD. Pardon? Again, maybe you can answer. We haven't seen any information right now. I mean, there's reports in the Teams admin center that you can export, but this is via the Qs app. We've not been given that information just yet to see if we can, you know, export and take those out. But I would assume hopefully that would come soon. So it's in a private public preview right now, set to be, yeah, whatever that means. Yeah, but it's effectively, if you've got a CSM you can reach out to at Microsoft, they can hopefully give you that preview. But, I mean, June is when we're expecting to see GA. So we should at least be seeing some of this functionality hit our GA tenants in June. And that's everything on the Qs app itself. Like I mentioned, anything I've gone through, subject to change. Thought I'd throw that in there for Microsoft, but yeah, that's just the information that we've been shown right now. So next I'll spend just a small amount of time. Now we've kind of gone through what some of those, you know, Contact Center Lite features are, seeing if they, you know, align to your organizational needs and how best to do that. So, you know, one big question is that Qs app going to fill the gap? But first, you need to understand, what those needs are, and best way to do that. One thing I always recommend is running proof of concepts. I love talking to customers, and I'll say to them, give me your biggest and your hardest queue, and I'll migrate that to Teams the best way I can. So, you'd be very surprised taking, something from an Avaya Cisco. And one thing is flipping that methodology of instead of just copying what you've currently got, let's take that more consultative approach, use the Teams features that's already in there, like the presence space routing, that sort of thing, and rebuild it in Teams. So we'll come on to determining if a third-party solution is absolutely necessary. This slide here is just not an exhaustive list. There is stuff missing from here. I'm sure if there's any contact center providers in the room, they'll jump up and shout some more that I've missed. But effectively, this is kind of, what's missing. So natively, intelligent routing, things like if I'm speaking to a customer and they say, I need skills-based routing, that's not something I can deliver with Teams natively right now. So the first thing I do is, let's talk around those third-party suppliers. Things like last agent routing, preferred agent, all that sort of routing for your end users. What I've been talking about today is usually aimed towards an inbound contact center, but let's say you've got an outbound contact center. Things like auto dialers, that sort of thing, are really great pieces of kit. Teams just doesn't have that natively built in right now. Omni-channel capabilities. I know there's been some mentions around omni-channel capabilities potentially coming to Teams. Right now there isn't anything built natively. Things like web chat, emails, socials, that sort of thing, from a contact center point of view. You've got end-to-end reporting. So again, in your reporting, we see a call come in, hit your auto attendant, it stayed there for 30 seconds, went to this person, went to that person transferred. All that sort of end-to-end reporting right now is not something that I've seen in Teams. So if that's your kind of major need, it might be a third party that you need. Not necessarily contact center, but very, very close, attendant console. That's not something that Microsoft give natively right now. They made great strides with the calls tab, but it's not a kind of, attendant console experience just yet. Deeper CRM integrations, just over the kind of screen pops that we mentioned before. We've not even scratched the surface talking around things like the Dynamics 365 contact center or anything like that. But if you kind of want those type of integrations in Teams right now, then third party would be your requirement. Kind of in-call features as well, things like that timing queue that I mentioned before. That's a big one that I've been asked quite a lot from customers. Things like callback, that sort of thing, making sure that, if someone does drop out of a queue, you can kind of call them back at another time. Wrap-up tasks, call codes, context parameters, bringing in and asking questions about my order. That sort of thing is just not there right now with native Teams call queues. Call flows as well. So right now, if you wanted to go in and build a call flow, it'd be in the Teams admin center. There's some great kind of PowerShell scripts and things out there to rebuild call flows if required. But right now, some third parties do some great functionality where you can, easily go out and copy a flow and, make some small changes to that. And then lastly, at the end, policy-based recording for compliance. Again, not contact center directly, but a lot of the time, if you're talking around contact center functionality, that policy-based recording will come up. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Is Microsoft on the path to building a solution that would meet what's missing? Or
That's a question for him.
what's your aspiration? Yeah. So and by the way, I'm on the technical strategy team. I'm not product management, but the answer there has been that we're not
Okay. So next section, I was going to talk around the integration models that you're going to have with your third-party providers. So right now they sit in 3 camps: connect, extend, or the power integration model. So right now you can only be certified in connect and extend. There's no program or real definition out there at the moment for certification into power, but maybe we'll see that come in the future. We've already seen, a couple third-party contact center providers that have kind of put the toes into, creating some or parts of their application, inside of the power model. Just to briefly go over them though, we have the connect model. So this will, the way it gets calls into Microsoft Teams is via certified session border controllers via direct routing, and that's how it's going to get calls into your infrastructure. One thing you'll see on the bottom right though is a tromboning of calls or a hairpinning of calls. So this is the customer rings in, it's going to hit an SBC, go into a contact center provider, and then back out to that SBC to go up to Teams. That potentially can add latency. Yeah.
Does that mean not only works for direct routing calls if that's who you're using if you're operating connect or
Yeah, you can't use the connect model. Okay, sorry, yeah. What you could do is, if you were to use something like Operator Connect, what you would need to do is place that SBC into there before, yeah. So effectively, my apologies. Effectively, with this, you're going to need an additional SBC that's going to effectively speak up to Teams, whereas when we look at something like the extend model, you don't need that additional SBC. So I'll come on to that in a second. One thing in here as well is an optional use for the Teams Graph APIs and the Cloud Communication APIs for that integration into Teams to use some of that in-call functionality. This was that extend model that I mentioned as well before. So this is using the Teams client platform, those Teams Graph APIs and the Cloud Communications APIs directly. And what we can see is, the calls come in. For a direct routing customer, there may be an SBC there. But for something like an Operator Connect customer or a call and plans customer, you're calling directly into the Teams infrastructure. Okay? So the important thing with the extend model is call controls are handled natively with the Teams calling APIs in that native Teams calling experience as well. For extend model contact centers, Teams is usually your primarily calling endpoint for your agents. Something where a connect model is more viable is if you want to bring some Cisco agents and other agents into the contact center as well, whilst also delivering Teams. You have a little bit more flexibility there. But with the extend model, deployment times, that sort of thing is definitely reduced if you're not having to place in another SBC for the deployment. And with the extend model as well, you're already using Teams for chat and collaboration, and it's just a great way to keep that Teams functionality all together. That's part of the API calls, yeah. Lastly, we have the power model. So this is on Microsoft documentation is coming soon. It's based on SDKs being released from Microsoft. Through some vendors that I'm already speaking to, they've already got access to those, and they're building some functionality, in the power model itself. But effectively, this is going to be embedding that native Teams experience directly into an application. Okay. So next, you kind of got who's out there. So who are your third-party providers? Again, there's a fair few out there. We've got the certification program. This effectively means that Microsoft have vetted these solutions and they're certified in either Connect or Extend to be able to deliver that integration to you. There's 24 of them out there at the moment. Some will do Connect, some will do Extend, some will do a bit of both, and a couple of them will probably see more and more start to bring that power functionality into their suite as well. A couple of those are probably here today, so definitely go and have a chat to those, and have a chat to me as well if you want me to point you in any directions. I'm happy to help. So last part, we'll talk around some real world scenarios that I've had with customers. So just keep it quite small. We've got 3 real world customer examples. Everything that I'll talk about now is made all natively with Teams. So it's all native Teams auto attendance and call queues. No third parties involved in these particular solutions. And they're also solutions that they didn't realize that could be built, directly in Teams. So first of all, we had an organization which had multiple offices in the US, and they were consolidating all those into one. What was important for these guys is they'd already given that number out to a number of customers. It's on business cards. It's already been placed out there. They didn't just want to lose that number, and also they didn't want to place a carrier forward. So placing carrier forwards on can place costs, increase costs, that sort of thing. So what this particular, super simple, what we did for this customer was they had 2 resources accounts pointing to the exact same flow. Okay, so we have the 2 numbers here. Either of those rang, we hit the auto attendant. We asked the question around holiday. We asked the question around out of hours. And then if you just want to leave a message, that passes to a group mailbox, which is picked up the next day. And then we have the other option, which is that out of hours provider. So in this particular scenario, that external number was the 24/7 security number for the building. But let's say we hit in hours, we have a sales queue and a technical support queue, faults queue. So a couple of different queues down there. We have the operator down at the bottom as well, which is just set to a person in the organization. But for these queues, we've got an attendant queue, so everybody gets rang. We have that longest idle. And then this technical support and faults queue also will go off to a second line queue as well, based on those exception handling that we said before. Okay. Next, we have a customer which has a 24/7 support service. So this is something similar to what LoopHub use. We're a 24/7 business. We offer 24/7 support. But there's the ability for, being able to follow the sun, and no matter which one of those numbers gets rang, you're going to get through and speak to a person. Okay. So for example, we start on the left-hand side in the US. You ring that. First check we do is an out-of-hours check. So if we are out of hours, let's move that to the EMEA region. And then first check we do, are we actually in hours for this region? If we're not, then we'll pass to the APAC region. So the big thing here is, again, you ring any of the numbers, any of the support numbers, you're going to get through to a person, if it's configured correctly. And then lastly, this is just a little one to throw in there as well. We had a particular customer that only had half-day receptionists. So the first, few hours of the day, they wanted to just pass that to a dial by name. So when the number got rang, went to the auto attendant, and if it was out of hours, then we would pass to a dial by name auto attendant. So if you wanted to, you could get through to a person that way. But then when we were in hours, we had a bank of receptionists that would then field those calls and transfer those calls internally within the business. Excellent. So we'll just summarize now. So creating those call flows that we've got currently inside of Teams is a combination of auto attendance and call queues. So you may be using nested queues, to be able to get that flow that you require. Try a proof of concept. Like I said before, take your hardest queue or the most complex queue, see what you can do with Teams. Have a real good think of if that queues app does fill the gap, because I think, for some customers it definitely will. Make sure you're fully understanding those organizations' needs. So like I said before, you could just build what you've currently got, or maybe take that more consultative approach to deliver that queue. If you do land on a third party, you need to know what your options are and what kind of integration method works for you as an organization. Any questions? Sorry, did you want to take a picture? Okay. Perfect. Oh, yeah, sorry. Not that I know of.
I thought that was maybe coming later. Okay, I think that's not yet. Okay, so I didn't mishear that.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, second one. With authorized users,
Yeah.
one of the capabilities was allowing an authorized user to modify the content of a reading or a message, what have you. Is that user going to be able to only select from curated elements, or may they create new?
New, yeah. So it's all yeah. 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 Oh, you'll be able to upload your own audio file in there as well. Yeah. Perfect. Any more questions? Yeah. So an auto attendant and a caller ID policy. Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah. What you can't do is an auto attendant and a call queue. Yeah, but with the policies you'll be fine. So you can assign that number to the auto attendant, but then also use it for outbound dialing, which I assume that's what you want to get to. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, reach out and I'll give you a hand if needed. Just one thing to mention, I do have Copilot stickers, team stickers, very limited amount. If you want one, come grab one. Thank you.